Let me tell you something, and I need you to picture it the way I saw it, not the way they wrote it up later, the way it actually was, standing right there on that pavement with the sun in my eyes. There was a man who stood at the gates of Ashmore Palace every single day, and nobody, and I mean nobody, ever saw him move. That's where this starts. You ever been to a place like that? One of those big royal gates, the black iron ones, gold tips on the spikes. Ashmore Palace sits at the top of a long road in the old part of the city, and on a summer morning the whole place just sort of glows. The stone goes the color of honey. The flags hang dead still when there's no wind. It was a Tuesday. I remember because my sister had told me Tuesdays were quieter, fewer crowds, and she was wrong, because there were hundreds of us packed up against that railing. July, properly hot. The kind of heat that comes up off the road and makes the air wobble. You could smell it, that warm tarmac smell, mixed with somebody's ice cream melting, and the perfume of about 40 different tourists all standing too close together. I was there because of my daughter, Sophie, 7 years old, gap in her front teeth and absolutely mad about princesses. We'd come all the way down on the train, 2.5 hours, just so she could stand at that gate and maybe see a real one. And the guards, God, she loved the guards. There were 2 of them on duty at the front that morning. You know the type. The tall hats, the red coats, the white belts crossed over the chest. They stand in those little boxes, sentry boxes, I think they're called, and they don't move. They don't talk. They don't look at you. Sophie kept tugging my sleeve. Daddy, is he real? Is he a real person? He's real, love. He's not blinking. He's blinking, you're just not catching it. She watched him for about a full minute, dead serious, trying to catch him blink. I'll never forget that. Her little face, all scrunched up with concentration, while behind us the whole world carried on being loud and hot and ordinary. Now let me tell you about the guard, because he matters. He's the whole thing, really. The one on the left was younger. Pink in the cheeks, you could tell he was new, kept doing tiny little adjustments, shifting his weight. You know the way you do when your feet hurt and you're trying to hide it. But the one on the right was different. He was older. Not old, but older than the other one by a good 15 years, I'd say. And he stood like, how do I put this, like a wall that happened to be wearing a uniform, completely still, like the stillness wasn't even hard for him, like he could have stood there through a thunderstorm and not noticed. There was a woman next to me, older lady, lovely Welsh accent, and she nodded at him and said quietly, "That one's been here years. My husband saw him on duty back when our boy was small. Same fella, never moves." I didn't think much of it at the time. Just a man doing a job. A very still man doing a very still job. I didn't know yet. So here's the setup, here's the picture. Hundreds of us along the railing. The gates shut. Beyond them, this beautiful gravel courtyard, raked perfect, and the palace sitting up at the back of it like something out of a storybook. There was word going round the crowd, you know how it spreads, person to person like a wave, that Princess Elara was coming out. Princess Elara, the young one, the people's favorite, they called her. She'd been doing a thing that morning, some charity visit inside, and she was meant to come out around 11 and get into a car and go on to the next thing. The crowd was buzzing about it, everyone with their phones up already, even though there was nothing to film yet. Just an empty courtyard and 2 men who didn't move. Sophie was up on my shoulders by now, getting heavy, but I didn't care. She had her little plastic crown on, pink. Bought it at a stall on the way for £4 and she'd not taken it off since. Can you see, love? I can see the man, the not moving man. Anyone else? No, just him. The clock somewhere chimed. Bells. You could hear them roll out over the rooftops, and the crowd kind of hushed for a second, the way crowds do when a bell rings, like everyone's been reminded of something at the same time. 11 o'clock. And then the doors of the palace opened. I want to slow down here, because this is the part nobody got on film properly, and it's the part I think about most. She came out Princess Elara, and honestly she was smaller than I expected. They always look bigger on the telly. She had a pale blue dress on, and she lifted her hand to wave, and the whole crowd just lost its mind. Cheering, screaming, kids on shoulders everywhere you looked. There was a car waiting in the courtyard. Black, polished so shiny it had the clouds in it. A man in a suit by the door. She started walking towards it, slow, waving, smiling at people, stopping now and then to take a flower off a child through the railings, that sort of thing. And the guard on the right, my still man, he did not move. Not even then, not even for her. He just stood, eyes front, doing his job. Everything was lovely. Everything was perfect. That's the thing about it. That's what makes my stomach drop even now when I tell it. Everything was so completely, beautifully fine. And then I heard the engine. You know how you can tell sometimes when a sound is wrong? Before your brain even works out why, your body's already flinched. It was a car, coming up the road. The long road that runs along the front of the palace, the public one, where the buses go. But it was coming too fast. Way too fast. I felt it before I understood it. This low growl getting louder, and then a screech, and somebody to my left said, "What's he doing?" And somebody else screamed. And then everyone turned at once, this whole wall of people turning their heads the same direction like birds on a wire. Silver car, I'll never forget it. Silver with one of the headlights cracked, coming up that road at a speed you should never ever do near a crowd, engine screaming, and it wasn't slowing down. It was speeding up. Now I had Sophie on my shoulders. That's the first thing that went through me. Not fear for me, her. I grabbed her ankles so hard she yelped. The car, it mounted the curb, up onto the pavement. The far end, maybe 60, 70 yards down from where I was, but it was coming along the front, coming towards the gates, towards the crowd, towards where the princess was standing in her pale blue dress with a flower in her hand. People started running, but there's nowhere to run, is there, when you're packed against a railing? That's the horror of it. We were trapped between the iron and the road, hundreds of us, and this thing was coming. I heard the screaming go up a pitch, that awful sound. You've never heard it unless you've heard it. And the princess, she'd stopped, frozen. The man in the suit by the car was shouting, lunging for her, but he was too far, he was on the wrong side. And that's when it happened. That's when the quiet man moved. I want to tell you exactly what I saw because the videos don't show it right. The angle's wrong on all of them, but I saw it. I was looking right at it. The guard on the right, the still one, the one who hadn't so much as twitched in 2 hours, he broke. And I don't mean he panicked. I mean the opposite. I mean every bit of that stillness, all that storing up, it all went off at once like it had been waiting its whole life for this exact second. He dropped his weapon, just let it go. I heard it hit the gravel. And he ran. I have never seen a man move like that. Not in real life. He came out of that sentry box and he was just gone, low and fast, straight across the courtyard, straight for her, in those heavy boots and that thick red coat in the July heat, and he didn't slow down for a single step. The crowd was a scream now, one long scream. The car hit the railing about 40 yards down. Sparks. This god-awful shriek of metal. It bounced off, swung back into the road, and the driver overcorrected and it came spinning, sideways now, towards the gates. And the princess was right there. And he reached her. He reached her. I'll finish that bit in a moment. I have to breathe. You don't think you'll ever see something like that. You go to a place like Ashmore on a Tuesday in July with your little girl in a 4-quid crown, and you think the most exciting thing that'll happen is you'll see a princess wave. You don't think you'll watch a man run towards a moving car. Towards it, not away, towards. He hit her at full speed, the guard. He wrapped her up both arms completely around her, and he didn't stop. He just kept going, used all that speed to carry the two of them right off their feet and out of the line of it. Behind one of the big stone pillars by the courtyard wall, the thick ones, the ones that have stood there 200 years. And the car came through where she'd been standing. Right through it. Right through that exact patch of gravel where the Princess Elara had been holding a little girl's flower not 3 seconds before. Then it hit the pillar. I felt that, in my chest, in my feet through the pavement. This enormous crunch, and the whole front of that silver car just folded up like paper, and glass went everywhere. And then quiet. Not real quiet. There's no such thing in a crowd that size. But that horrible held breath quiet where everyone's brain is trying to catch up with what their eyes just did. Steam coming off the car, one wheel still spinning, the crushed front end pressed right up against the pillar, the same pillar the guard had pulled her behind. He'd known. Somehow, in a half-second, with the whole world ending, he'd known exactly where the safe spot was, behind the stone. He'd put 200 years of granite between that princess and a ton of speeding metal, and he'd done it with his own body as the thing that got her there. Sophie was crying, screaming really up on my shoulders, and I got her down and I held her so tight and I kept saying, I've got you, you're safe, Daddy's got you, over and over, and I don't think it was even for her by the end. I think it was for me. The whole crowd was shaking. People sat down right there on the pavement. A man near me was being sick. The Welsh lady had both hands over her mouth and tears just pouring down. And nobody, for a few seconds, nobody moved towards the gates. We just stood, stunned. Then the other guard, the young one, the pink-cheeked new boy who'd been shifting his weight all morning. He moved too. He was already running, already shouting into a radio. Already at the car, at the wreck of it, doing what he'd been trained to do, and within seconds there were more of them, men in suits, more uniforms, pouring out of doors I hadn't even noticed were there. But my eyes never left the pillar. Because behind it, slowly, so slowly, the older guard was getting up. And I'm going to stop part one there, right there, with him getting up. Because what happened next, what he did, what she said to him, and the thing I saw on his face that I have never been able to forget, that's the part I really need to tell you. But I need a second first, even now, even after all this time. That stillness, you see, all those years of it, the Welsh lady's husband seeing him stand there when their boy was small, all that nothing, all that not moving, day after day after day. It was never nothing. He was waiting, so he's getting up. Behind the pillar, slow, and I want you to understand the shape of what I'm looking at because it's burned into me. The red coat's torn at the shoulder. His big bearskin hat, the tall fuzzy one, it's gone, knocked clean off somewhere in all of it, and without it he looks suddenly smaller. More like a man, less like a statue. His hair's gray at the sides, short, soaked through with sweat. There's blood on his hand, not loads, but enough that I could see it from where I stood, this dark line running down from his knuckles. And he's not getting up for himself. That's the thing. He's getting up and turning immediately, reaching down because she's there. The princess, Princess Elara, on the gravel beside him where the two of them landed, and she's not moving yet, and you could see the whole of him just lock onto that. Forget his own body completely. I heard him speak. First time all morning, first time probably that half the crowd had ever heard a sound out of one of those guards. Ma'am, look at me. Low voice, steady, steadier than any voice has a right to be 3 seconds after that. And she moved, thank God. She moved, got an elbow under herself, dazed, hair come loose, one shoe gone, looked up at him. And there was this moment, this tiny stretched-out moment, where she just stared at him like she couldn't work out who he was or what had happened or why she was on the ground. You're all right, he said. You're all right, I've got you. Don't get up yet, just breathe. I've thought about those words so much. I've got you. Same words I was saying to Sophie, same exact words. There must be something in us, mustn't there, that reaches for that same sentence when everything's gone to pieces. I've got you. Now around all this, understand, the world had gone completely mad. Sirens already, coming from everywhere, that rising falling wail bouncing off the buildings. The men in suits had swarmed the whole courtyard. Two of them were at the car, the silver wreck, still steaming against the far pillar, pulling at the driver's door. And the crowd, us, we were a mess, genuine mess. People crying, people filming, people just standing there with their hands on their heads, not knowing what to do with their own bodies. The young guard, the new one, he was trying to push people back from the railing, and his voice had gone high and cracked, and he was so clearly terrified and doing it anyway, and I felt for that lad. I really did. First week, maybe. And this. The Welsh lady beside me had grabbed my arm, total stranger, had my arm in both hands like we'd known each other 40 years. "Is she alive?" she kept saying. "Is the girl alive? Can you see? Is she alive?" "She's alive," I told her. "She's moving, look, she's moving." And she was. Elara was sitting up now with the guard's hand on her back, and she had that look people get, that shaking, hollow, just survived look. I've seen it since on other faces. You don't forget it once you know it. Here's a small thing, a stupid small thing that got me. Sophie's crown. In all of it, the running, me grabbing her down, holding her, her little pink plastic crown had fallen off. And once she'd stopped crying enough to notice, that's what she was upset about. Not the car, not the noise, the crown. She wanted her crown. And I'm down on the pavement scrabbling about between everyone's feet looking for a 4 quid plastic crown while sirens are screaming, because that was the only thing in the entire world I could actually do for her. I couldn't fix the rest, but I could find the crown. Found it, cracked down one side, put it back on her head, and she went quiet and held onto my neck, and that was that. You do strange things. When the big thing's too big, you hunt for the small thing. Right back to the courtyard, back to him. The medics got to her, proper ones, fast. They must have had them on standby for the visit, and they were checking her over. And the guard now, finally, you saw it hit him. His own arm. He'd been holding it funny, and I'd not clocked why, but as he stepped back to let the medics in, he sort of cradled it against his chest, and one of the suited men noticed and went to him, and the guard waved him off. Waved him off. Wouldn't have it. Shook his head, said something I couldn't hear, but I could read it off him plain as anything. Her first. That arm was hurt. Badly, turned out, I'll get to that. And he stood there and held it against himself and would not be looked at until he'd watched, with his own eyes, the medics get the princess up onto her feet. Only then, only when she was standing, wrapped in one of those silver blankets, walking, wobbly, but walking, towards the doors with people either side of her. Only then did he let himself be hurt. Sat down on the gravel, just sat, right where he was, and let the medic come. I need to tell you about the driver, because people always ask. The man in the silver car. They got the door open. He was alive, I'll say that straight, because the not knowing is its own kind of awful, and I won't do that to you. He was alive. Hurt, but alive. And the word that went round the crowd later in bits and pieces, and I'll be honest with you, I'm telling you what was said that day, not a court report, was that it hadn't been an attack. Not the way everyone first thought. The story that came down was a medical thing. Something gone wrong with him at the wheel. A blackout, a fit, something that he'd lost control completely, foot jammed down, no idea where he was or what he was doing. Now I don't know the full truth of that. I'm one man who was on a pavement, but I'll tell you what it changed, hearing it, and what it didn't. What it changed, the anger. The crowd had been baying, some of them in those first wild minutes, who is he, get him, what's he done, and when the medical word came round, that went out of people. You watched it go out of them, replaced with something quieter and sadder. What it didn't change, not one single thing about what that guard did. Because here's the point, and it's the whole point. The guard didn't know why the car was coming. He didn't get to know. He didn't get a briefing. He had half a second and a ton of metal coming at a woman he was sworn to protect, and the why of it didn't matter and was never going to matter. He moved on the what. Bravery isn't knowing it'll be okay. Bravery's moving before you know anything at all. So while the medics had him on the gravel, this is when the next thing happened, and this is the bit I came here to tell you, really. The bit that took the legs out from under me. The Princess Elara, they were walking her to the doors, safe wrapped up, and she stopped. She stopped, and she pulled away from the people holding her, gentle but firm, the way you do when you've decided something and you're not going to be talked out of it, and she turned around. And she walked back. Across the courtyard. One shoe on, one shoe off, silver blanket round her shoulders, hair everywhere, and the whole machine of people around her sort of flapping, and not knowing whether to stop her. And she walked right back to where the guard was sitting on the ground with a medic working on his arm. And she knelt down, in her pale blue dress, on that gravel next to him. The crowd went absolutely silent. I swear to you, hundreds of people, and you could have heard a pin drop on that pavement. I couldn't hear all of it. I wish I could tell you I had. But I heard some, and the rest I've pieced from people who were closer and from what she said publicly after, and I'll tell it to you as true as I can hold it. She said his name. She knew his name. Some quiet thank you we all expected. That's not what stopped my heart. What stopped my heart was that she said his name first, like she'd known it for years, and his head came up. And the thing on his face. I've started and stopped trying to describe it about 100 times. It wasn't pride. It wasn't relief, even though there was that. It was recognition, like something he'd carried quietly for a very long time had just been seen, just for a second, by the one person it would mean the most from. She put her hand on his good shoulder, said something else. And he, this enormous still man, this wall in a red coat, he nodded, and his jaw went tight, the way a man's does when he's holding something back in front of a crowd, and he said, very simply, the only bit I caught clear. Always, ma'am. That's it, that's all, always, ma'am. I'm not ashamed to tell you I cried. Grown man on a pavement holding his daughter, crying his eyes out. So was half the crowd. The Welsh lady had gone to pieces entirely. Always, ma'am. What a thing to mean it. Now here's where it turns. Here's the part that took a plain, incredible story and made it the thing I'll be telling till I'm old. There was a man near us, older fella, retired looking, had that bearing, you know the kind, you can tell he'd worn a uniform himself once. He'd gone very quiet and very pale watching it all, and when the always ma'am landed, he said something mostly to himself, but I was close enough to catch it. He said the guard's name, the same name the princess had used, and then he said, "That's him, that's God, that's him." And I said, "You know him." And he looked at me, this stranger, with the strangest expression, and he said, "Not him, but I know of him. Everyone who's served here knows of him." And then he told me, right there, while the medics worked and the sirens wailed and the steam came off the wreck. And what he told me is why the still man stood so still, for all those years, why the Welsh lady's husband saw him on that exact spot when their boy was small, why he was always, always there. But I'm going to make you wait, just a little, because you have to feel the weight of it the way I felt it, and to do that I have to tell you the rest of the scene first, how it ended, how they got her inside, what the courtyard looked like after, the things Sophie said to me on the train home that I've never told anyone. And then I'll tell you what the old soldier told me about the guard. And once you know it, you'll never look at one of those still men in the red coats the same way again. I promise you that. I never have. They got the princess inside in the end, properly this time. She went, but at the door she stopped once more, and she looked back across the courtyard at him, sitting there on the gravel, and she didn't wave at the crowd. She wasn't performing. She just looked at him, one long look. and then she was gone through the doors. The medics got his coat off, and that's when we saw the arm wasn't right at all, the way they were handling it, the board they brought, the care, it was bad. Broken, at least. He'd run full tilt into a grown woman and a stone pillar and carried both their weight through it, and he'd done it. We worked out later, with that arm already taking the worst of the landing. He'd shielded her with the side of his own body that broke. They got him onto a stretcher. And here's the last thing, the thing that finished the crowd off completely. As they lifted him, as they carried that man past the railings towards the ambulance, the crowd started clapping. Just one or two at first, then more, then all of us, hundreds of us clapping this great rolling wave of it, and people shouting thank you and just roaring for him. This man most of us hadn't even properly looked at 2 hours before, this man we'd assumed was furniture. And he lifted his good hand, just slightly, off the stretcher, a few inches, acknowledged us. And then they were past, and the doors of the ambulance shut, and that was the last any of us saw of him that day. The courtyard afterwards was the strangest sight. All that grand raked gravel, churned to bits. One pale blue shoe lying on its side. The silver car folded into the pillar like a dropped tin. His bearskin hat, that tall, proud hat, lying in the dirt where it had come off, and one of the young guards going over, very carefully, and picking it up and brushing it down, and holding it like it was made of glass. Sophie watched all of it from my arms, quiet as anything now. And on the train home, 2.5 hours, her half asleep against me, cracked pink crown still on her head, she said the thing I'll never forget. She said, "Daddy, the not-moving man moved. He did, love, he did." And she thought about it the way 7-year-olds do, with her whole face. And then she said, "He was being still so he'd be ready." And I had to look out the window for a bit, because out of the mouth of my 7-year-old in a 4-quid crown had come the truest thing anybody said about that whole day. The truest thing I'd heard the old soldier dance all the way around. He was being still so he'd be ready. And that is exactly what the old soldier had told me, standing on the pavement while they carried the guard away. He told me why the man was always on that spot, why he never moved, why of all the gates and all the posts he was always, year after year, there. It had to do with a day 15 years before. It had to do with someone he hadn't been able to save. And it had to do with a promise, the one I'd heard him keep in 2 words on the gravel, to Princess kneeling in a torn blue dress. "Always, ma'am." I'll tell you the whole of it now, so I'm standing on the pavement. Sophie on my hip, cracked crown on her head. The ambulance doors have just shut. And there's this old soldier next to me, the retired one, the one who went pale, the one who said that's him, and he's looking at me like he's decided something. And he tells me, I'm going to tell it to you the way he told it to me, best as I can hold it. Some of it he knew firsthand. Some of it's the thing that gets passed quietly between men who have worn that uniform, the kind of story that doesn't go in the papers but never, ever gets forgotten by the people it belongs to. So, 15 years before that Tuesday. The guard, our still man, he was young then, about the age of that pink-cheeked new boy who'd been shifting his weight all morning. Brand new, keen. The old soldier said you could always tell the keen ones, they polished things that didn't need polishing. And back then the old soldier said, the man wasn't quiet at all. That surprised me. I'd assumed he'd always been a wall, but no. Apparently he'd been a talker, a laugher, the sort who got pulled up for grinning on parade, big personality in a job that doesn't want one. And he had a friend, another young guard. The 2 of them came up together, joined the same week, stood the same posts. Thick as thieves, the old soldier said, like brothers. I won't give you his friend's name. The old soldier gave it to me, and I'll keep it. It felt like the kind of thing you keep. Here's what happened. There was a day, and the old soldier was careful here. He slowed right down. There was a day, 15 years back, when something went wrong at the palace. He didn't give me every detail, and I don't think he had every detail, and I'm not going to invent them for you. But the shape of it was this. Something happened fast, something dangerous, the kind of half-second thing that nobody sees coming. And in that half-second, 15 years ago, our still man, young and keen and laughing back then, he froze. Just for a moment, just for a heartbeat, the way nearly anyone would, the way it's only human to. And his friend didn't. His friend moved, did the brave thing, stepped into the gap that our man had frozen in front of. And his friend didn't come home. The old soldier stopped there for a while. We both just stood. The sirens were still going somewhere, and the crowd was still in bits behind us, and this old man was looking at the spot where the ambulance had been with his eyes gone wet and far away. He was never the same, he said finally. After, the lad I'm telling you about, the one they carried out of here just now. And I said quietly, because what else do you say, did they blame him for freezing? And the old soldier shook his head. Nobody blamed him. Inquiry cleared him completely. Said there was nothing he could have done different. Said it happened too fast for anyone. He paused. Nobody blamed him but him. And that, the old soldier said, was when the stillness started. He went quiet, the man, stopped laughing, stopped talking, and he started doing something nobody asked him to do, something there's no rule about, something he just did. He stopped freezing. You understand what I mean? He trained it out of himself. Every single day standing that post, he stood absolutely, perfectly still, not because the job required statue stillness, though it does, but because he was teaching his own body, over and over, hour after hour, year after year, that stillness was a choice he was making, that he was in control of it, that he would never again be still because he froze. He would only ever be still because he chose to be. And the second, the instant, he needed to move, he would move, because he'd spent 15 years making sure the freezing had nowhere left to live in him. That's why he never moves, the old soldier said. People think it's discipline. It is, but it's not just that. He looked at me. He's standing guard over the moment he failed, every day, so it never happens again. And then he said the thing that finished me. And he asked for that post, asked for it, the busiest gate, the one where the family actually comes and goes, where it could happen again. Most lads want the quiet posts. The old soldier shook his head slowly. Not him. He wanted the one where, if it ever came again, if it ever came for someone he was sworn to, he'd be standing right there, ready, so that this time. He couldn't finish it, he didn't have to. Because we'd both just watched him finish it himself. I want you to hold all of that. And then I want you to go back with me to the courtyard, to half an hour earlier. A car comes up the road too fast. A young woman in a pale blue dress freezes. She froze, the princess, the way it's only human to, and the man in the suit is too far, and there is exactly 1/2 second, the same length of half second as 15 years ago, the exact same shape of moment that took his friend and broke his life in two. And this time he does not freeze. This time, 15 years of choosing stillness uncoils all at once, and a man runs towards a moving car, towards the exact thing that ruined him, and he does the thing his friend did. He steps into the gap. But this time he comes home. And this time the person in the gap, she lives. That's not a man being brave on instinct. I'd thought that standing there. I was wrong. That's a man who spent 15 years preparing in total silence for a debt he was determined to pay. And when it came due, when the universe came back around with the same half second and offered him the chance to answer it differently, he was ready. He was being still so he'd be ready. My 7-year-old said it on a train without knowing any of this, and she was righter than she could possibly have known. Now the promise, always, ma'am. I asked the old soldier about that too, because it had stuck in me. The way she'd said his name, the way he'd said always, like it was an old word between them, not a new one. And the old soldier told me the last piece, and it's the piece that I think about most, of everything, all of it. The Princess Elara, she'd have been a little girl, 15 years ago, a child in the palace. And the friend who died, the brave one, the one who stepped into the gap, part of his duty back then had been the family, the children. He'd been one of the ones who stood near them, who they knew, who, in the way children do, they'd grown fond of. She'd have been small, 6, maybe 7, the age my Sophie is now. The friend who died had been her guard. I had to sit down a bit, inside myself, when he told me that. I'm telling you so you can sit down too. The man who died 15 years ago had stood guard over a little princess. And when he died, his best friend, broken, blaming himself, unable to laugh anymore, that man took the post, took the family's gate. And he had stood there silent for 15 years, keeping watch over the same little girl, now grown, in his dead friend's place. She knew, that's why she knew his name. That's why she knew it without thinking in the worst moment of her life on the gravel. She'd grown up with this silent man at the gate, the quiet one, the one who never moved, the one who, she must have understood at some point in growing up, was standing there for someone else, for the friend, for the man who'd been hers once when she was small and who was gone. Always, ma'am, wasn't 2 words said to a stranger. It was the renewal of a promise a dead man made to a little girl, carried in silence for 15 years by the friend who took his place, spoken out loud at last, only when it had finally been kept. Always, ma'am. I'll never get over it, I never will. The crowd thinned out eventually. They moved us along. There were statements to give for some folk who'd been closer, and roads closed, and all the machinery of a thing like that grinding into motion. The old soldier shook my hand before he went. I never even got his name. I think about that too, all the people in a moment like that whose names you never learn. The Welsh lady, the old soldier, the pink-cheeked boy who picked up the hat. Sophie slept most of the train home, cracked crown and all. I tucked her in that night, and she half woke and asked me, mumbling, "Is the not moving man okay?" And I said, "He's going to be okay, love." And he was, by the way. I followed it after. The arm took a long time, but he was all right. And this is true, this got reported. He went back, once he'd healed, went back to that same post, the busy one, the family's gate. Of course he did. I went back myself, a year later. On the anniversary, more or less, though I didn't plan it that way. I just realized once I was there. Took Sophie. She insisted on the crown, a new one. She'd grown out of the old one, but she wanted a crown. And he was there, standing at the gate, still, perfectly still, the way he is, the way he's been for 16 years now. Red coat, tall hat, eyes front. A wall in a uniform that 100 tourists walked past that day without a second look, snapping their photos, never knowing. And Sophie stood at the railing and looked at him for the longest time. Didn't try to make him blink this time, just looked. And then she did something I didn't expect. She took off her crown, the new one, and she set it down, very carefully, on the little ledge at the bottom of the railing, near him, as near as she could get. And she said, very quietly, not really to me, "For the one who didn't come home." I don't know where she got it. I never told her the friend's story, she'd have been too little to carry it. But kids hear more than you think on trains, half asleep against your shoulder. Or maybe she just felt it, felt the weight of that gate. Some places hold it and some people can feel it. The guard didn't move. Of course he didn't, eyes front. But I was watching his face. I've made a study of that face, you understand. And I'd swear to you, I'd swear on anything, that something in it shifted. Just barely. Just for a second. He'd seen the crown. So that's the story. That's the whole of it, as true as I can tell it. People ask me what I took away from it. What the lesson is, like there has to be one. And I never quite know what to say, because it's not really a lesson. It's just a thing I saw on a Tuesday in July that changed how I look at people. But if you pushed me, I'd say this. You walk past still people all the time, people who don't move, people who seem like furniture. Like background, like they're just standing there doing nothing. The quiet ones, the ones who never make a fuss, and you assume the stillness is empty, that nothing's going on in there. You're wrong nearly every time you're wrong. Because some of the stillest people you'll ever meet aren't empty at all. They're full to the brim. They're carrying something. A grief, a promise, a debt, a name they keep so they don't have to say it. And they're standing still not because they're nothing, but because they're holding something so heavy that the only way to carry it is to stand perfectly, perfectly still. And every now and then, once in a great while, you get to see why. You get to see the still man move. And when he does, when 16 years of held breath finally lets go all at once, you understand that the stillness was never the absence of anything. It was the cost of being ready. There's a man who stands at the gates of Ashmore Palace every single day, and almost nobody who walks past him will ever know what he carries. But I know, and now you do too. So if you're ever there, if you're ever standing at some grand gate on a hot afternoon, with the flags hanging dead still, and a quiet man in a red coat staring at nothing, don't walk past too fast. Look at him a moment, and in your heart just once say thank you. Because you never know which of the still ones is standing guard over the worst day of his life, keeping a promise to someone you'll never meet, waiting, year after year, for the half second when he gets to keep it.